mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang mag-ibig, helas ng sigat.
Ferdinand Edralin Marcos was born to Mariano Marcos and his wife Josefa Edralin in Sarat, Ilocos Norte, Philippines on 11 September 1917. Marcos' father was a qualified lawyer and also one of the leading politicians in the Philippines. Ferdinand Emmanuel Edralin Marcos Sr. was a Filipino politician who went on to serve as the president of the country for 21 years. Marcos' father was lawyer and politician in his own right, and he followed in his father's footsteps, both in terms of his choice of education as well as career choice. Marcos had a brush with the law early on in his life when he was accused of being involved in the murder of
The proclamation of martial law is not a military takeover. I, as your duly elected President of the Republic, use this power which may be implemented by the military authorities, but still is a power embodied in the Constitution to protect the Republic of the Philippines and our democracy.
In 1965, Marcos was elected as the President of the Philippines, and during his campaign for the presidency, he stressed on his past as a soldier, and the campaign proved to be successful. A year after assuming the presidency, Marcos sent Philippine soldiers to serve in the Vietnam War, where they served for 4 years. Marcos' third term as the President of Philippines ran into trouble in 1985 when there was an attempt to impeach him for stealing state assets to the tune of millions, but the committee struck it down. The same year, Marcos called for elections ahead of schedule and duly won it. However, there were allegations of electoral corruption. The failure of the electoral process gave further power to the People Power movement. A year after the election, the opposition overtook the city and Marcos fled. He found asylum in Hawaii.
Tayo ay naniniwala na bawat isa sa atin ay may kaluluwa. Yang mga komunista na yan, hindi nila ina-admiti na may kaluluwa ang tao, kaya parang manok na pinapatay yung mga tao.
The proclamation of martial law is not a military takeover. I, as your duly elected President of the Republic, use this power which may be implemented by the military authorities, but still is a power embodied in the Constitution to protect the Republic of the Philippines and our democracy.
On the night of September 23, 1972, Ferdinand Marcos spoke to the nation by television and by radio to make it known that he had declared martial law in the Philippines. Though the announcement was made on September 23, the actual document had been signed September 21, 1972. Due to a special superstition Marcos had about numbers.
Hindi, doon dapat kayo sa kabila. Kitang... MJ?
For a moment, everything seemed possible. From February 22 to 25, 1986, hundreds of thousands of Filipinos gathered on Epifanio de los Santos Avenue to protest President Ferdinand Marcos and his claim that he had won re-election over Corazon Aquino.
Sa unang araw noong February 22, 1986, umpisang nagtipon ang mga tao sa EDSA sa labas ng Camp Crame. Tumiwalag sa administrasyon ni Marcos si Juan Ponce Enrile na nooy Defense Minister at si Fidel Ramos na dating Vice Chief of Staff ng Armed Forces of the Philippines o AFP.
Tassans head Jaime Cardinal Sims and also bots call over Radio Veritas to gather around Camps Aguinaldo and claim and protect rebels led by Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile, Armed Force Vice Chief of Staff Gen. Fidel Ramos and reformed the Armed Forces Movement. Metropolitan Command Head Major General Prospero Olivas tells President Marcos he is incapable of dispersing crowds at EDSA. He also defies Marcos' order to call Army Commander Major General Josepos Ramas for reinforcements. During those momentous 4 days of February 1986, millions of Filipinos along Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, EDSA, in Metro Manila, and in cities all over the country, showed exemplary courage and stood against and peacefully overthrew the dictatorial regime of President Ferdinand Marcos.
Ng mga militar sa Camp Crame. Bandang alas 5 ng umaga, nagdesisyon ang Pangulong Marcos na hindi bababa sa pwesto kasunod ng abiso ng kanyang asawa at dating First Lady Imelda Marcos. Pero halos 30 minuto ang lumipas. Nagbigay
Ferdinand Marcos fled the Philippines Tuesday, ending 20 years as President. Corazon C. Aquino succeeded him, saying a new life had begun for her country. Mr. Marcos, facing pressure from all sides to step down, left the presidential palace shortly after 9 p.m., 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and traveled by helicopter to Clark Air Base. They're accompanied by his wife, Imelda, and Jan Fabian C. Ver, a close associate and former chief of the Philippines Military Forces. He boarded an American Air Force plane for Guam, a United States territory in the Pacific. A Defense Department statement said 55 people were in Mr. Marcos' party aboard 2 aircraft. The Associated Press reported from Agana, Guam, greeted by Acting Governor Mr. Marcos arrived at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam this morning, where he was greeted by Acting Governor Edward D. Reyes.
pero patuloy na nanaig ang demokrasya at ang people power. Bandang alas 4 ng hapon sa Malacanang, inalok ni US Brigadier General Ted Allen ang pamilya Marcos na gamitin ang mga American helicopters o di kaya'y mga barko para lisanin ang Malacanang. Pero si Marcos, sinabing mas pipiliin niyang mamatay sa palasyo. Alas 5 ng hapon, tinawagan ni Marcos si Enrile para sana'y makipag-ugnayan sa ideyang lisanin ang Malacanang. Pero nag-uumpisa ng mag-alsabalutan ang pamilya. Alas 6 na ng hapon nang napapayag ang Pangulo na tuluyang umalis sa Malacanang. Inarga na sa mga bangka ang mga bagahe ng pamilya Marcos. At inihanda na ang Pangarap Golf Course kung saan susunduin ng mga helicopter ang pamilya Marcos. 8:40 ng gabi, sinisigurado ng mga convoy ang dadaanan ng pamilya Marcos. Ilang minuto ang lumipas. Isa-isang isinasakay ng helicopter ang pamilya, pati na ang ibang kaalyado nito. Ganap na 9:05 ng gabi nang umalis ang unang helicopter sa Malacanang. Makalipas ang halos isang oras, dumating na sa Clark Air Base ang mga Marcos. Pero ang sumalubong sa kanila, mga hiyaw ng taga-suporta ni Aquino. Bandang 9:52 ng gabi, inanunsyo sa radyo.
The departure of Mr. Marcos from Manila ended a day in which he pleaded with Washington for help in clinging to office. Then went through an inaugural ceremony that was held apparently after he had decided to leave Aquino II is inaugurated. Ferdinand E. Marcos, who ruled the Philippines for 20 years until he was ousted in 1986, died in exile here today at St. Francis Medical Center after a long battle with heart, lung, and kidney ailments. He was 72 years old. A hospital spokesman, Eugene Tiwanok, said Mr. Marcos died of cardiac arrest shortly after midnight. The former Philippine president had been hospitalized for nearly 10 months, often comatose. His wife Imelda was at his bedside.
Maayos ang mga bestida, praktisado ang marcha ng mga sundalo, gumamit ng helicopter ng pamahalaan at may same-day edit pa. Kaya tanong ng marami, biglaan ba talaga ito o pinaghanda? Sabi sila ng totoo na Huwebes lang sila sinabihan ng mga Marcos na mangyayari na ang libing noong Biyernes. Ayon sa kanya, ang pamilya Marcos ang nagdesisyong gawing biglaan ang libing at direktang nakipag-usap ang mga Marcos hindi sa Department of National Defense kundi sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. 7. Inatasan na ni Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana si AFP Chief of Staff General Ricardo Visaya na asikasuhin na ang pagpapalibing kay Marcos sa libingan ng mga bayani. Ayon sa order ni Lorenzana, ang libing ay katuparan ng ipinangako ng Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte noong kampanya.
The burial of Marcos, who died in 1989 at the libingan ng mga bayani, has been a controversial issue as objectors, including victims of human rights violations during the dictator's brutal period of rule and participants of the People Power Revolution, have opposed attempts to bury Marcos, citing the rampant corruption and cronyism of his administration. Its practice of silencing dissent through arrest, disappearance, and torture by the police and military, and his family's infamous kleptocracy amounting to an estimated $10 billion worth of stolen money that earned Ferdinand and his wife Imelda the Guinness World Record for the greatest theft of a government. Opinion on his burial were split. 50% of the 1,800 respondents of a survey conducted by social weather stations in February 2016 said Marcos was worthy to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani, while the other half rejected a hero's burial. The burial of Marcos with military honors was conducted in a private ceremony on November 18, 2016. It resulted in nationwide protests by groups, sectors, and personalities opposing the burial of Marcos at the state cemetery. On August 7, 2016, President Rodrigo Duterte gave the order to bury former President Ferdinand Marcos at the libingan ng mga bayani, saying that Marcos was qualified to be buried at the cemetery due to being a former president and a soldier. Duterte said he was open to demonstrations against the burial plan, but insisted that the former president was qualified to be buried at the cemetery. He also added that the burial date may be moved to September 11, which was the birthday of the deceased president.